Hey, so in this video, we're going to set up the mind-body problem. This is a problem that's going to be with us for the rest of the course, right? We're going to see this when we start talking about AIs, when we talk about consciousness, free will. This is going to show up in a lot of different contexts. So roughly, we'll run through this problem, but we're really going to focus on dualism, right? Last week we looked at Rene Descartes' meditations, and we looked at, the cogito. And we got to the point where he was building a model of what he thought a person was, right? Essentially, this union of a non-physical mind and a physical body, right? So we'll look at the dualist account of what how minds are related to the body, and some problems with that. So roughly, the mind-body problem is just that relationship, right? How are minds related to physical stuff, right? At first glance, right, it's intuitive to think that everything in the world is physical, right? Like that's definitely the default view in science. That the world is made up of physical stuff and perhaps the relationships between physical things. But there's no, to the best of our knowledge, no non-physical stuff. There's not really any room for that in contemporary science, right? All that said, the mind seems remarkably different from the physical things in the world. And for a long time, and for a lot of theorists, the only way to really understand what the mind is was to think of it as something fundamentally removed from the physical, perhaps a non-mental thing, like a non-physical thing. But that's really the question here is how are minds related to bodies? Are minds just reducible to physical stuff and it's just physical stuff that needs to be understood in the right kind of way? Is the mind a distinct thing from the physical? What's the relationship there, right? And there's a long history of people thinking about it in different ways. Um, for much of Western philosophical history, probably the default view, definitely not the only view, but probably the mainstream view was some form of dualism, right? Dualism again is, there's two things, right? There's physical stuff, mental stuff, right? That's dualism in a nutshell. So for the dualist, they're going to think that we are some sort of combination of those things. Descartes, that's the exact view he's giving us, right? Physical bodies with a non-physical mind. People talk about the ghost in the machine analogy. That's roughly the picture, right? Humans are in some way a union of physical stuff with a non-physical thing, right? The mind. So this is mind-body substance dualism, right? The universe is made up of two types of stuff, the physical stuff and then the mental stuff. It's definitely not the only way you can carve up reality, but we don't need to think about anything else, right? I guess you could think about reality is entirely composed of physical stuff, right? The physicalist would think that. An idealist would think that everything is at its core essence a mental thing, and then they would account for these things that we think of as physical stuff as well. Really, they're mental stuff understood the right, in the right kind of way. So you get a idealist that has a picture like that. Or you could have other kinds of dualism. There's a property dualist who will think there's just one kind of stuff, and then that stuff has mental properties and physical properties, but there's just the stuff. John Locke, he's not a property dualist, but he's got a picture kind of like that. There's this, the fundamental nature of things is substratum, is this thing, and then it has different kinds of properties. So I guess you could get a picture like that. General point, mind-body dualists are people that think that there's two types of things. There's mental stuff and physical stuff, right? We assume this, right? Like, is probably this is definitely not a mainstream view for somebody that say like is really gung-ho about the sciences or a naturalist, right? The sort of default picture in the sciences is going to be one where there is no non-physical stuff in existence, right? The world is in some way entirely composed of physical things, right? But it's really hard not to talk like a dualist, right? It is built right into our language and the way we think about ourselves. People say stuff like my brain made me do it, right? And the assumption there when you say a claim like that, or it's not me that did it, it's my body that did it, is there some sort of distinction, right? Like right in that sentence between you and your body. There's a lot of science that's been done talking about how people lack certain kinds of control. And a lot of that research, what they'll do is they'll just demonstrate that your body and its interaction with the environment is causally implicated in the things that you do. And they'll go, look, you didn't do it, your body did it. Or the environment caused your body to behave in certain ways, and so then you did something, but it was not really you, right? But that kind of language is assuming this distinction between you and like your brain, or you and your body, as if there's some sort of like as if there's different stuff. So those kind of sentences, right, are just sort of smuggling in dualist assumptions that a lot of people would disown, but then when they go and they start talking about how we act or what causes us to do the things we do or how we relate to the world, they'll bring in these dualist assumptions and they'll separate us in some core way from what the rest of the world's doing, right? Like it's really hard to get away from a dualist way of sort of just talking and thinking about realities. It's really intuitive, right? Um, Theists, right? When they talk about souls and bodies, right, and then they contrast their soul with like the physical world or something like that. That's a dualist picture, right? Really common. Yeah, that's all I want to say. Dualists, two different kinds of substance for the mind-body dualist: physical stuff, mental stuff, right? Descartes in that camp. Descartes is what we call a Cartesian interactionist, right? So he's got a very specific kind of dualism. He thinks that humans, just like the substance dualist, are made up of mental and physical stuff. And that what we fundamentally are is this composite being. We are a union of a physical and a mental thing, right? So, we've got a body and then it's controlled in some way by a non-physical mind, right? And the mind is distinct from the body. And throughout the meditations, he's arguing for that picture, right? By the end of the second meditation, he's got this picture where he most fundamentally is a thinking thing, right? And that's sort of like the only thing he deeply knows. And then as he sort of starts getting out of his head and start realizing that there's other types of things he can know, he comes to the conclusion that he's distinct, as all humans are, from their bodies fundamentally. We are the union of a body with a mind. We interact with that body, we control it, but we fundamentally are not merely the physical body, right? For the Cartesian picture, we're that union. Really important to this picture is that minds and bodies causally influence each other, right? Mental stuff causes physical stuff to do things, and physical stuff causes mental things to do things. And Descartes very quickly, what he realizes and what the Cartesian dualists in general, had to grapple with was, how do they account for a world in which there's these two fundamentally different stuff, non-physical mental things that are outside of the physical world, not subject to, say, the laws of physics, because they're not physical things. How is it that they're going to causally interact with a physical world? And how is it that a physical world is going to causally interact with a mental world? What's that look like? What are the scientific laws that govern it? How can we sort of gain any sort of knowledge of that, right? It's all nice and good to hand wave and say that, well, that's just how things are. That's just intuitive. That's what we experience. It's an entirely different kind of thing to, build a science that includes non-physical stuff that's causally interacting with the physical world. And that he's going to find right away is one of the big insurmountable problems that he's going to have to try to deal with, and his allies are going to have to try to deal with as they try to build that picture. In the meditation, Descartes got a number of arguments for why he thinks this kind of dualism is the case. Probably the main argument, at least for our purposes, is going to be the identity argument that he gives us, right? So Descartes says that we should talk about identity, right? Things that are identical to each other are going to share all their properties in common, right? So if a mind is identical to a body, then every fact about minds is going to be is going to apply to bodies, and vice versa, right? So there'll be nothing that are different about either of the things. And then Descartes is going to try to argue that his mind is radically different from his body because it has a different kind of property. So they can't be the same thing. He says, right, and he got here at the end of the second meditation, I'm such that my existence cannot be doubted, right? You remember he went through all these levels of skepticism, and he says, I cannot doubt my own existence, right? Because if I'm being deceived by a evil demon or, an evil deceiver of some sort, Well, I still have to exist or else nobody can deceive me, right? If I don't exist, I can't be deceived. And if I'm being deceived, then I'm having some sort of thoughts, right? And so this being deceived is itself to think. So if I exist and I'm thinking, um, like I can't doubt my own existence, right? To doubt my own existence is to be thinking and it is to exist. So I know that I am. I am fundamentally this thinking thing, right? I think, therefore I am. So he gets there, and so that's just the first premise, right? I'm such that my existence can't be doubted. Just went through that. But then he notes, well, I can rationally doubt the existence of my body. I did that earlier in the second meditation, right? Um, so it's entirely possible that my body doesn't exist. I might not be a physical thing, right? I might, or if I have a body, I might just be like something like a brain in a vat or something, or I might be a disembodied soul at the mercy of an evil demon. All these are rationally possible for Descartes. So he says, yeah, I can absolutely doubt the existence of my body, but I can't doubt my own existence. So what that tells me is that I must not be identical with my body because my body has a property that my mind doesn't, that I don't have. Um, so really what I should infer from that then is that I fundamentally am not my body. I am this mental stuff, right? I'm more connected to that than I am to my physical body, right? The thinking thing that I am, my mind, not identical to the body, although in this life it is, I am a union of that mind with the body. I myself most fundamentally am this non-physical mind, right? So there's his argument that he gives us, right? Different properties, so different things. Um, so he develops that view in the meditations, and then he spends, a lot of his career after that trying to flesh that view out, try to make it work. So for our purposes, that's all we need to know, right? Is dualism is, this view of the mind and body, fundamentally different things. They causally interact with each other in some magic way, and that's fundamentally what we are. So what's the relationship between minds and bodies? World is made up of physical and mental stuff, and we are the union of that, right? All well and good. Okay, what are the problems? So if you look at the letter from Princess Elizabeth Bohemia that I assigned you, right? She's raising this problem, really influential problem, called the interaction problem, right? And this has been, oh, this cuts right to the central core issue, I think, with the kind of dualism that he's proposing, right? She's just asking these questions. Well, look, you've given me this really nice picture, but you've got this really weird relationship. You've got non-physical things interacting with physical stuff, and then you've got physical stuff interacting with non-physical things, right? You've got a non-physical mind, and it is causing a physical body to do things, right? You got a mental state, and then it says wave your hand in a weird way in the air, and then you do it, right? So somehow that non-physical mind making a physical thing do something. You got to say more about that. Or, you bump your, elbow on a table and it hurts and then you go, ow, right? So that physical thing made your mind feel something. So somehow physical causally interacted with the non-physical. Again, you got to explain that, right? You can't just sort of have a like, well, it's intuitive to think this way. You need some sort of laws about how mental to physical stuff interact with each other. You got to give some like principled account of what that relationship looks like. And you just don't have that here, Descartes. So tell me more, right? And they go back and forth, and but I mean, she's got a really nice point, right? Like that's big, massive gap in the theory. And he's aware of this, right? He writes an entire book trying to respond to her, right? He develops the theory. He comes out and he says, look, um, given my picture, what I think is that the mind ultimately is going to use emotions, and that's sort of how it's going to get the body to do stuff. He's got this picture. He thinks the pituitary gland is, the seat of the brain where the mind is interacting with the physical body. And then what it does on his model is, I guess you think of the body as kind of a hydraulic machine, right? And so the emotions are changing roughly, the, the temperature of things in the body, making the body move, right? So the mind is using this kind of relationship to use the passions to guide the body in its movement, right? The mind can interact with the body by using emotion to heat up or cool down fluids in the body. allowing for movement. This is consistent with the science of his day, right? So it's not like he's just crazily thinking something ludicrous up. He's looking at, and again, Descartes, he's not just an armchair philosopher. He's a mathematician. He's a, experimental, like a natural philosopher. Like he's out there doing science, right? So he's giving a theory that's consistent with the world as him and his colleagues might see it, right? And he's saying this is sort of like the best picture I can come up with, right? Is this kind of relationship between parts of the brain and the rest of the body, and then the brain sending the mind sending these signals essentially to the brain, which is then sending, changing the temperature of things in the body. And really the passions are this movement energy or this moving force. So that's the model he gives us. Now, what should we say about that, right? I mean, we would say, oh, well, that's not consistent with contemporary brain science at all. Yeah, fair enough. The picture, I guess, that he's building, right, is one where there's a non-physical mind, connected to a physical body, and in order for there to be a causal relationship between mental and physical stuff, really what we need to do is we need to spell out whatever these laws are that govern physical to non-physical causation, whatever that would look like. And then we'd have to, we'd have to look at like kind of a full fleshed out, I guess, brain science that included some sort of relationship between these physical and non-physical things. That's as plausible as you want to think it is. It's definitely like a tremendous task, right? Like at a bare minimum, we'd say you've got this metaphysics where there's physical and non-physical stuff, and then it looks like the physical is largely doing most of the work without any need for a non-physical mind. But okay, so maybe it does something. What we have to do at some point is give an account of these relationships between this non-physical thing and the physical. And if you don't have that, you don't have a complete picture. The interactionist problem stands. I think it'd be reasonable to say that this is a really formidable challenge, if not a fatal challenge for the dualist, right? And it's been one that's been around since like Elizabeth raised it like on day one. So if you're sympathetic to the Cartesian picture, that's probably the biggest challenge you have to address. How is it that non-physical and physical things causally interact with each other? What on earth does that look like? How do you spell that out in a fully fleshed out and plausible way? Second problem that we're going to look at is from philosopher Gilbert Ryle. He accuses Descartes-style dualist of making what he calls a category mistake. Easiest way to understand this objection is just to think of an example, right? So Ryle says, imagine that we take somebody, with a visiting dignitary at the at the university, right? And so we say, and they ask for a tour, right? And they say, can you give me a tour? I really want to see the library and the cafeteria. So you take them around campus and you show them the classrooms, you show them the cafeteria, you show them the library, you show them the gym and, everywhere else, right? You show them the quad. And then after they give you give them this tour, you go, so what do you think? And they're like, oh, those are really nice buildings. I really appreciated that. But, I really would like to see the university. But all you've shown me is the classrooms and the quad and the library and the cafeteria. And you might be confused and you go, I just showed you the university, right? We just toured it. Ryle says, well, what this person here is doing is they're making a category mistake, right? Because you're showing them all the parts of the institution, right? You're showing them each and every single building on campus. And by showing them the parts, you've shown them the university, right? And they're making a mistake in failing to realize that by seeing the parts, they are seeing the whole, right? They want to be shown like a part, and that part itself will, they want to be shown something, right? And they'll go, oh, there's the university. But you can't do that. You just show them the whole thing, right? Which is to show them the university. That explanation was more confusing than it needed to be. Anyways, Ryle's going to apply this to the dualist, right? And he says, look, with our dualist, they're making the same kind of mistake. as our campus visitor is going to see, right? Um, Dualists sort of think that there's this, we can't fully describe our thoughts, our beliefs, and other mental states exhaustively in terms of biochemical processes, right? That's one of the arguments that would lead you to a kind of dualism, right? I can't really describe what it's like to see a red rose, or, to feel a cat scratching your face, I guess. Sorry, there's a picture of a cat. Um, you know, like just by talking about biochemical processes, I can't really capture that, what that feels like, or what that mental state is like, right? Or if you read a good book, right, and then you've got all this vivid imagery from the book you're reading, you go, well, look, all those mental states, like the experience of reading, that's not captured by just talking about like the biochemical and physical things that are going on right now. So it looks like there's something different from the physical and the mental, right? What Riles is saying is, look, you're just making a mistake here. If we give you an account of all of that stuff that's going on in the physical world, when you have that mental state, those things themselves are the mental state, right? To describe the parts completely is to describe the whole. And you're looking for something that's just not. I, there's no extra thing there, I guess, would be the way to think of it, right? Just as when you get a tour of the university and you see all the buildings, you've seen the university. There's not something else to show you. That's his claim, right? So therefore, the mind thinks the dualist is something entirely non-physical because it's over and above this. Ryle says, no, that's a category error. To describe the whole mechanistic physical picture is to describe the mental state. And there's nothing over and above that to go to, right? Finally, and I mean, this has come up a number of times, right? Paul Bloom in his article I assigned, right? He's going to make this claim, but dualism, especially the Cartesian dualist picture, is often charged with being radically inconsistent with contemporary brain science and physics, right? And it is definitely committed to metaphysics that go above and beyond what would be sort of like non-controversial in contemporary mind science, right? As far as we know, there are no non-physical substances. As far as we know, we can account for basically what we think mind is, and what's going on with our bodies, by talking about just physical stuff and the relationship between physical stuff. It doesn't look like there's a place in contemporary mind science or a need for non-physical substances to account for anything. Our universe is causally closed, as far as we are aware. So there's nothing outside of the physical universe that causes things to happen in our universe, right? The universe includes its causes. So we're biting a huge bullet, right? If we endorse substance dualism, is the claim that we get out of the Bloom article. And if we are going to do that, right, we need extraordinary proof to suggest that, nonetheless, we're going to bite this bullet because we have something so insurmountable and so in need of preserving in the dualist picture that we have to say there's something wrong with the science. No, a lot of people will point to consciousness or something, right? Or qualia, right? They'll say there's something special about subjectivity itself, or subjective experience, or what it is to be, right? Like that, the conscious experience of existing, that it does sort of justify being really skeptical about a world that doesn't include an account of that. And if you do need non-physical stuff to account for consciousness, well, I mean, there might be a reason to bite this kind of bullet. A lot of people can say, well, we probably can account for consciousness in a physical way too, right? So that's sort of where that debate goes. But so there's our problems, right? Dualists often get accused of making a category mistake. They're asking for something that's not necessary. That's going, and if you just explain the physical, you're already explaining the mind. Get accused of having a view that is radically inconsistent with the best science of the day, And the interaction problem, like how minds and physical stuff interact with each other, that seems completely magical and mystical on a dualist account. And you need better than that. Okay, last thing we'll say about dualism is there's some ways you can be a dualist that don't involve assuming different kinds of substances exist. And there's lots of dualists around today, right? Like all these different pictures of mind-body relationship. You're going to find people that defend any of these views. Um, One way to be a dualist is what we call property dualism. David Chalmers, right, one of the great living philosophers of the mind, at least on some days, and you know he defends a view called property dualism. Property dualism roughly says that the universe is only made up of one kind of stuff, right? So that they avoid all this kind of problems that arise out of having mental stuff and physical stuff and having to account for how they interact with each other. The property dualist says, well, there's just one stuff, but the stuff is neither physical nor mental. It's just the stuff can have mental and physical properties. So if you organize the stuff in the right way, then it'll have physical properties. But if you organize it in the right way, there will be non-physical properties as well. So on the kind of view that Chalmers has, there's a sense in which your desk has consciousness, right? Your desk has a mind in a certain sense. It's got these non-physical properties. They're just not organized in the right kind of way for them to be realized, might be one way to think about it. The view he's got here is not inconsistent with contemporary science, but it does assume there's sort of an unobservable, not physical property that things like us realize. And then in order to get something like that across, you also have to have a universe that is governed by psychophysical laws, right? So you have to build out, you have to have a revisionist account of physics, and then you have to build out what that looks like. And this isn't the right class for trying to talk through that. But I guess the general point here is you can build a dualist picture that doesn't go and assume sort of spooky metaphysics or make radical metaphysical accounts that go above and beyond sort of like what might be consistent with contemporary science. So if you're a dualist, but you're also sort of committed to this, I want to have a worldview that's entirely in line with like the best science of the day. There is still space for you there. And that's really the only reason I bring up the property dualist picture. It's a possibility that's on the table. Anyways, have a good one.